So welcome everyone to XpoNorth conference with Lights Camera Format. We're waiting for one more panelist. So I'm just going to introduce those that we have in the room and then reintroduce everyone when we are back. So we have Richard and Tony, who are co-CEOs of Buccaneer Media. Hi, Richard, and hi, Tony.
Hiya.
And then we have Hayley, who's joining us from Los Angeles. Hayley, I'm going to keep on bringing this up because it's 2 in the morning where you are. But Hayley is a former Fox and Sony A&E network executive, founder of Hayley Babcock Media Consulting, and board member of FRAPA. For those who don't know what that is, it's the Format Recognition Protection Association. And we have Lola Bubbosh joining us. Hi, Lola, who's a development producer at BBC Studios. And as I said before, this is Lights, Camera, Format. We have such an amazing panel. Thank you guys for joining us. I just want to dive in a little bit to first who you are and what you do. And since Hayley's joining us from 2 in the morning, Hayley, it's only fair that you go first. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I can doze off while everybody else is speaking.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hayley. As Jessica said, thank you for that nice introduction. I come from producing. I started in live, daily, sort of breakfast TV type of television, which is a really great school for learning how to tell stories quickly, get them on the air, keep moving. It morphed into working on all sorts of light entertainment programming. And I had the opportunity to work overseas years ago and live and work in Germany, where I worked for Fremantle. And I was executive producer and head of development at Fremantle in Germany. So I started working on a lot of different shows that are formats, shows that are repeatable and made again and again in different territories to be localized. So I was the executive producer of Family Feud, otherwise known as Family Fortunes, also of The Dating Game, also of other people's formats. Those are shows owned by Fremantle, but I also executive produced Jeopardy, which was a show that we had as a format from the US studio. So I learned a lot about taking formats in and adapting them for the country I was in, plus protecting formats that already existed and taking them elsewhere. Went on to work at CBS International, overseeing international formats around the world, and then built the business at Fox. So shows like Temptation Island and things like that I did there. Moved on to Sony, where Dragon's Den and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire were in our coffers. And I also worked on scripted programming as well while I was in Germany. So I took Sony sitcoms and oversaw the German production of those. So I worked on the format side, and then at A&E helped roll out those formats that are a little bit left of center, not your classic game show, reality show, but still repeatable and localizable. And that's my background in the formats world.
Hayley, thank you. There's a lot to dive in there, so we're gonna 100% come back to that. But speaking of A&E, I think there's someone else here who has that connection, Richard, and also who's, again, co-CEO with Tony of Buccaneer Media. Tony's joining us from Glasgow, knee-deep in production. Can you guys explain a little both about who you are, what you do in your company, Buccaneer Media?
Go for it, Tony.
Oh, okay. That's exactly what happened. Okay, so I'm Tony Wood, and my background really is as a drama producer, and obviously I kind of go very sort of creative, lovey about everything I do, which sort of means refusing the notion of a format being in a drama story in the sense that it's an original story each time. I'm not entirely sure that any of that is actually true, but you kind of believe it when you're making a show. My background is I worked a lot for Granada TV, and I was an executive producer on BBC Drama. I am a former head of continuing dramas for the ITV network. I produced Coronation Street for a couple of years. I sort of accidentally co-created The Only Way is Essex. and since 2013, I've been running Buccaneer with Richard in the last couple of years, which has been a real shot in the arm. As a production company, we really are concentrating principally on drama and maybe some family and a little bit of kids stuff. But effectively, what we've set ourselves up to do is to be an international production company looking for voice and originality in far-flung places of the globe. Really, that's us.
That's wonderful, Tony. Thank you. Richard, do you have anything you'd like to kind of add to that?
No, I mean, just on my background is, you know, as you say, I worked at A&E previously, but I set up the co-production business, really always having had a background in international, primarily in sales, but then transitioning across into sort of the co-production side of the business, which eventually brought sort of Tony and I together, where I was trying to forge something, I guess, very similar to what Tony's views were in terms of building his slate. We were just doing them in different buildings and with different companies, and I think sort of came together with the same view that, you know, trying to get commissions just out of your own territory was not necessarily a thing of the past, but it will be soon if it isn't already. And there's many ways to get things up and running these days. And seeing the slate that Tony had built over the 5 years previous to us becoming partners, you know, I met many producers doing what I was doing. But this was a slate that for me stood out and was one that I thought I can use my knowledge and skill set and contacts to grow the company, and that's what we've been doing together for the last 2 years and having a lot of fun doing it.
That's so fantastic. You know, I think you guys and also Hayley are coming at it from such different angles, and really looking forward to jumping into this idea of format, where format comes from, what people are looking for, and is there such thing as format at all? As Tony brings up, that if you're following and building a narrative from scratch and you're cultivating talent and trying to get people's original voice and original storytelling, where does it become format? So Lola, last but certainly not least, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thank you. I'll be quick. I'm a relative newcomer, given the length of experience you're all describing. I come from a journalism background, actually. I was an editor at the Observer newspaper, and then briefly and disastrously at Vogue magazine, where I then ended up, because I had an interest in book to film adaptation, ended up working at Miramax Films, and did that for 12 years. And then combined that towards the end with the Walt Disney Studio, where I tended to specialize in a lot of YA material. Projects like Artemis Fowl, which sadly became a slightly disastrous movie, but you know, that sort of thing. And then took a brief hiatus, and now am with BBC Studios, which people who don't know the ins and outs of the BBC is the commercial arm of the BBC, and looking for content, creating IP and content, and using all the things I suppose I cultivated in my previous career, you know, articles, books, people's stories, to create content. So that's me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. I think you're being also modest, because out of anyone, you have such a sharp sense of story and what makes a story, and can sense when story has legs. So thank you all again for joining us. For those who are just joining, our participants, I want to let everyone know that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and towards the end, probably about 15 minutes, we got to a little bit of a late start, so 15 minutes before the end, Richard is going to disappear, but you can write. It has nothing to do with the Q&A. He is a popular man and has another meeting to get to, but you can use the Q&A to write in your questions. I promise I will ask them to our panelists. But first, can we talk about format? And Tony, I'm sorry if the word kind of rubs you up the wrong way, but can we talk about how, for an artist who's creating a script, do they need to think about what folks are buying in at the moment? What is, you know, you go to from the BBC down to Channel 4, sorry, across to Channel 4, people are going to be asking, what are you buying in at the moment? And that has to do with format. So does format exist? Does it trending? And should artists really care about it? I think that's my first question.
When I was thinking about this session, I sort of anticipated that this would be a question, and I came to the conclusion I shouldn't be concerned by that because you'll ask somebody before me. So maybe that hasn't quite gone the way I hoped. I mean, for me, I mean, the answer is clearly yes or no. Yes and no, rather. In that, I mean, it would be really foolish to deny wholly what you know, the situation you're describing, but I think certainly we've built our company operating in a completely antithetical way to that. As far as I'm concerned, what we did was we put together a slate that was absolutely centering around voices and originality, and you know, and the company was largely born out of the fact that back when we started, lots of people in Britain were looking at shows like The Killing or The Bridge, and there was a kind of general sense that we wouldn't be able to make those, and if those shows were formatable, which clearly they are, they've been remade in various different cultures with varying degrees of success, but the sense was that we wouldn't be able to generate something like that because of its local specificity, and I mean that in clearly the geography, the physicality of it, but also the education of that society, the politics of it, the themes, etc., etc. So we took the opposite approach, which was to go and speak to those writers and basically ask them if they'd like to write something for the English-speaking market, and that was astonishing. Firstly, I was shocked to discover I was the first person who had gone to those writers. You know, these are the people who were creating and delivering shows that were changing the world at the time in Europe. And so we began to build a slate with people of that ilk, and so the only way of being able to deliver those kind of voices into a market with which they were unfamiliar was to say to them, we will support your vision, and even though it may be a long road, we will get it made, and indeed it has been a long road. But there's something incredibly satisfying about it. So I mean, I think there's no right or wrong way to do this, but we're certainly living in an age now where, particularly as all of those global streamers just get larger and larger, and we're kind of ending, we're pushing towards, kind of living in the Avengers Endgame, really, with where everybody is of that status. And I think what you have to have there is point of difference and originality. And you only have to look at the way that nobody, if you were following a format, nobody would have launched Stranger Things. Nobody would have anticipated The Queen's Gambit is going to be the standout show of the year, if indeed it is. And so from a drama point of view, from a scripted point of view, I think we're in a wonderful position whereby, clearly there are local versions to be made of shows that have done magnificently. I was speaking to a Saudi producer the other day who had brilliant local success with a reformatted version of Jane the Virgin, which you would not have anticipated in Saudi Arabia.
You wouldn't.
So, yeah, but I think the market accommodates all of those.
Yes.
So that would be my view.
Tony, I really like that, because basically what you're saying is good storytelling is good storytelling is good storytelling. And for those who aren't familiar with the business or the process, sometimes that does take a of nurturing and a lot of protection to allow those new stories or original stories or just good stories to rise. But they do get to a size, whereas you said they can have more life when they do become successful in different iterations. So I guess, Hayley, that's where you come in. And so for you, what is your relationship with format? How do you see that as connected to storytelling?
Well, I think in answer to sort of your first question is, are there formats or are there not? The answer is there absolutely positively are, both in the scripted world and the unscripted world.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of money and they're a successful arm of business. The DNA of a format is I liken a format to giving somebody the blueprints to a house, and you know exactly where the load-bearing walls are. You know what the basic core DNA of the story is, the beginning, the middle, the end, whether it is a scripted arc series or it is an in-studio game show.
Yeah.
There are certain tenets of it that if you change it, the walls will crumble.
Yeah.
What you do with that blueprint in Sweden may look very different than what you do with it in Mexico. In Sweden, the house is whitewashed and it has a blue roof, and all bedrooms are classically in the back of a home and the living room in front of the home. In Mexico, it's stucco with red tile roof and all the bedrooms they put in the front. That doesn't matter. How you decorate it locally, that's what makes it a format. You can adapt it locally, but the core DNA of it does not change. And using the bridge as an example that Tony brought up is a classic example. The basic storyline of the bridge is the same as in Denmark, Sweden, as it is in US, Mexico, as it is in the UK, France. That storyline, those basic characters are completely and totally recognizable, even if you don't speak the language and you just watch the series. And yet the nuances of how they live, what they're going through, what their relationships are like, are localized. And that is the definition of a format. You're selling script, you're selling character Bibles, you're selling a story arc that has already been crafted and figured out and is protectable and recognizable and remakeable. That's it, whether it's scripted or unscripted. So I think, you know.
Hey, I think that's really helpful, because I think when a lot of folks hear format, especially again, young writers, artists, they're thinking, is this maybe they don't think, is this going back to Aristotle's Poetics, where there's like a comedy and a tragedy and what that looks like? You're saying there's actually more specific DNA to a format than just genre. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It has nothing to do with genre. It has to do with that specific show, the beats of that show, the beats of that story in the scripted world, the character. Another an unscripted example, if I'm trying to think of something more recognizable, but if you all know the classic quiz show Jeopardy, which may or may not be on the air wherever you live, but it's probably something you know. I can say to you very simply, it is a quiz show where there are contestants. There is a board of categories with answers in them. The answers are revealed and the contestants have to pose the appropriate question to that answer. Period, end of sentence. That is Jeopardy. Any other quiz, you describe it in any other way and you know it's not Jeopardy. Now, if Jeopardy has 9 contestants in your country and there are dancing girls who escort them in, and in another country there are 3 contestants, that's all kind of interchangeable. It may change the gameplay. How many categories are on the board? You can be flexible about that. But as soon as what you put on the board is questions and the people who are at the podiums give you answers, that's not Jeopardy.
Yeah, I know it exactly. Okay, so that is interesting. Hayley, thank you very much. So Lola, from a development perspective, how much, when you're looking at adapting a book or buying in some IP or looking at a story and optioning it, how much do you think about format and how it fits into a format?
The truth is I don't really, to be very frank. I just and thinking of what's a good story, really. We're all guided up to a point by what people are buying, what people are looking for. But really, the bottom line is just instinctively, I think, how you react to this particular idea. And, you know, I remember not too long ago talking to an agent in LA, and I had been given the brief, as I regularly am, about what studios is looking for and so on. And in the middle of my reciting, you know, we're looking for X, we're looking for Y, and she just sort of chuckled and she said, so basically you're looking for what everyone else is looking for. So I think, you know, we're all kind of looking sometimes for the same thing. And I think the key really is what you personally respond to, and whether you can bring your colleagues on board to that. And then you try and go and find people who want to make it. So I maybe forge a slightly different path in that sense.
I think that role is so important. And I don't know if I would call it the kind of like fairy godmother of like the development process, but I think it's really critical that there are people out there who are in positions of power or gatekeepers that believe in new voices and ideas. Because what happens is that the cycle happens all over again. The moment something gets believed in and becomes good and then successful, it becomes a format. And now everyone wants that, but no one wanted it to start with. So that idea of risk taking, I think, was it Henry Ford that said, if I asked what people wanted, they'd say faster horses.
That's right. That's a famous quote. Yeah.
Exactly. So Richard, this one's for you, but if you don't want to answer it, you can also say pass. So is format changing? So with all these other ways of original voices getting out there, from YouTube to TikTok to self-publishing, are there more opportunities for the way formats get established or voices get established? Is that changing?
Yeah, yes, it is, but I think it's only changing in the sense that there is more outlets for people's voices to be heard. Whether the way of doing that necessarily lends itself particularly well to then creating scripts that are shows that can be picked up. I think, yes, there are in certain cases. I mean, we recently did a podcast. I think podcasts are a fantastic way of developing out a story that originated from Tony before I started doing a documentary, and the documentary itself was such a vast story that it always felt like it needed more room to breathe, and a podcast was a fantastic space in which to do that. Yeah. And so, you know, if the sort of feature doc became, and was it a 10-part podcast, Tony? I think it was 10. Yeah, and that in itself was a development process that wasn't one that stayed silent. It's happened to have a medium to go out on a podcast, and then now we can look at it and think about how maybe that develops into a script. And in terms of the TikToks and the like, maybe I might just be too old, but I'm less of a believer in that side of things. But whichever route you take, I think it always just you know, I'm the business side of what we do primarily, and the financial side of what we do. And but I've always said throughout my career that you've got to start with the creative, and you start with a voice. And if that's right and it's looked after well, and many of the people that we work with are young, and you want them to be able to just keep doing what they're doing without molding them into what the business is, because you know there's plenty of years for them to become nulled and sort of shaped into something. But whilst they're you know that young and just super talented and have something that is different, you know, to what is out there. And I'm not saying different in terms of a genre. I mean, it's, you know, you could do a crime show and you can do it in a very original way. Crime is not new, as we all know, but some shows in the crime space can feel very new when you attach a voice that you haven't heard before, which could be a 24-year-old who's never written anything in their life, but you just find these people. To go back to your question about that format, I think trying things is the way, one of the luxuries that technology is allowing us as producers to do. I mean, give it a go. If it doesn't work, try it somewhere else. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing it.
That's exactly right. And it's that kind of, I don't know why I got this image, but the idea of if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? You could create all the formats you want, but if you can't find your audience, then it doesn't really matter. So you were talking.
Jessica, can I just make another point on that as well? So I think it's a really interesting area, and I completely agree with Hayley that, I mean, everything has formatable points. Of course it does, and once it exists, you can you can certainly find the format within it, even if it wasn't created to be so. But I think that point about technology is really interesting, because the technological revolution has created a generation and subsequent generations coming up behind them who are not trained in a traditional manner, and they are all completely literate in delivering narrative, even if that is a 30-second TikTok video. But and there's usage of image, of sound, of music, of sort of juxtaposition, really, of all of those things. And so I think we are on the pathway to a point where originality of delivery will sort of transcend and maybe take over formats to a certain degree. And it's very interesting sort of seeing what happened with Quibi, which obviously didn't achieve in the way that they wanted it to, but actually it looked at perspectives differently, and I think it's really interesting to wonder about where format will be in 10 years time, and certainly in 20 years time.
Yeah, I agree. Hayley, do you have a thought about that too, about new technology and how it's affecting, or have you seen it affect format?
Well, I've seen it affect creatives and coming to the surface. I think, we used to work in a field that was very narrow and only certain people got to plant seeds. They were the only ones allowed into the field. They planted the seeds and some of those seeds grew. Now the field is wide open. Everybody who can find a plot of land can plant a seed and grow. I think Issa Rae is a really great example, and Insecure. I mean, she started in a digital universe. She had her voice, she found a following, and then she was sort of discovered in more mainstream media and became a bit of a juggernaut of a creative and executive and actress and actor, all of that now. But she started it on her own, and I think that's happening. It's been happening for a while across the board. I mean, I think it started a long time ago, sort of with Maker Studio and that whole universe, trying to fill the YouTube world when YouTube was kind of the digital place to be in terms of storytelling. So I think for sure, technology gives room for more voices, and I think what Tony said is correct. There are a lot of people out there, and what Tony and Richard said, there can be a 24-year-old who's never written anything before that anybody's seen, but they are great storytellers. So they have great ideas, and those ideas can find the light of day more easily now. I still do think, and that's not new. I mean, you go back to, were you quoting Aristotle? You go back to, those days of the bards who were traveling around just recounting stories. I mean, that still happens in a lot of cultures, passing down stories. Storytelling is part of being human. And I don't think that's going to change at all. I just think the way we find a way to bring our voices forward and tell those stories is growing exponentially. Yeah. But I think the concept of a format is still going to remain. Some stories or some kind of storytelling or some thing is going to pop, and it's going to be so relatable and understandable and likable and clearly remakeable on a local level that it will be formatted. And that's the thing about formats that we haven't really talked about. Storytelling is, on the one hand, from the 10,000-foot view, it's very universal. Look at Shakespeare, right? How many languages has Shakespeare been translated into? Innumerable. But the reason it's been translated is that people absorb stories on a very local level. Mm-hmm. So the reason that formats exist is that that story is so universal or so good or so important to be told. There's a reason for it to be told on a local level. If you're watching a crime series, right? If you're in Germany, you want to see a green and white police car and hear those sirens. You don't want to see a black and white panda in New York anymore. You don't need to. Somebody can remake it and make it feel local. They're driving down the streets of, of Munich as opposed to Glasgow. Yeah. So I think formats are always going to exist for those stories that are really worth retelling everywhere at a very locally visceral, personalized level.
Do you know what that makes me think of? I think when you had those bards doing epic poetry in kind of the Greek and Roman traditions, they could improvise. And although they were talking about the Trojan War, some really epic stories, they could improvise and put the names of the households in the story that they were telling. They localized it. It was kind of epic format themes, but localized. So, okay. How does one, if it's almost the opposite of chaos theory, let's say you are a creative, you've created an idea that can have multiple platforms. It could be a podcast, it could be a television show. And then ultimately this original seed of an idea is going to get big enough into being a format that can be adapted. How does one protect the original seed that you've put in, the actual bones of the idea?
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here, but that is what Frappa was created to answer. That's the question. So it's a nonprofit organization, but there are certain ways, there are certain really mundane things that you can do. First of all, what I think all of us understand, all of us on this who are creators of any kind, understand that the moment you have an idea, 7 other people have a similar idea in China and Estonia and, Peru. I mean, it's just kind of the way the world works, right? And so what you do when you have your ideas, you keep really good records. You write it, you email it to yourself. So you've got a timestamp on when that idea came to fruition. You come up with as much detail as you can. Everybody can say, I have an idea for a show about a family and it's funny. Well, that's almost every sitcom ever created, right? But as soon as you get more and more and more specific, my show about a family has 2 dads and they each bring 2 kids to the table and they're living together. You're getting more and more and more specific. You're more and more and more protected. Mm-hmm. And so you come up with storylines, if it's scripted, characters, you come up with scenes, you come up with, if it's a game, you come up with game rules, you come up with a set design, you come up with a graphics package, you come up with catchphrases, all of the things that you can do to add to your blueprint and make it more and more detailed, and have that in writing. Keep records of when you have meetings with people, when you sent that idea to somebody, when they responded to it. That's how you can start protecting your IP. And then he who gets there first wins. Get it made. Yeah. That is such a dumb answer, but that's really what it is. Get it made, because he who gets it produced first really wins.
Yes. Thank you very much. I am conscious of the time too, and I know people have questions. And Richard, I just want to thank you before you disappear so much for coming. It's been a joy.
Not at all. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And a great panel. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, before we open it up to the floor for questions, I do have we're talking a lot about formats and ideas and stories and supporting original voices. And I just want to know, from a maker's point of view, because we have mostly makers in the audience, how do you find your original voice? So if someone from the audience was writing a script or had a podcast already that they've been trying so hard to get in front of people, what do you recommend as a good way to approach someone like you? Anybody?
I'd say never give up for a start. If you really believe in your idea, don't be discouraged. Find if you have an agent, that always helps. But I'll cede to the others, but I would say to anyone, never ever, don't give up. If you really want to.
Lola, does an agent, for again, just to really basic questions, is why does an agent help?
The agent has the relationships.
Okay.
You know, people, I know, for instance, when I was at Miramax, I'm not sure what it's like now. Legally, I wasn't able to just take anything cold, slush pile type stuff. So it's more for the relationships, but even that may not be necessary these days. All I can impart from my perspective is just keep at it, just keep doing it, keep trying.
Okay, thank you. And Tony, how do you find the original voices that you tend to feel like they're worth the investment of time and cultivation?
It's kind of similar to what Lola said, really. Certainly having an agent makes life easier from our point of view and from, excuse me, from the creative's point of view. Certainly when we get a submission from an agent that we trust, it goes to the top of the pile. You know, you read it, and even if you don't chime with that, you'll spend a bit of time thinking about why that agent did, and maybe you begin to approach it from a different perspective. I think I'd also say that again, echoing what Lola's just said, originality is important. I do think craft is important, and craft is a very difficult thing to quantify, given the conversation we were having earlier about the changing technologies and the sort of democratization of craft, if you will. You know, it's all subjective, but telling a story well, in speaking about the scripted world, telling a story well with insights, with emotions that make you as a reader, you know, I would imagine that Lola and I are in a relatively similar position of just, I mean, I dread to think how many scripts I've read. You know, you read a lot, you know, and to find one that makes you switch off your critical faculties and just have an emotional connection with it. I mean, that's a joy. That's an absolute joy. So I think that, I think for people, you know, from the other side of that, wishing to deliver something that operates that way, I think, you know, I think we've got to be realistic. It's this is a billion-pound, multi-billion-pound industry, and it's a global industry now, and it takes quite a bit of work to be able to have your voice heard. It's you know, you wouldn't think you could play for Manchester United just because you can run and maybe do a kick, but you know, it's really tough. And I think that you have to learn your craft in the way that you might want to learn to be a concert pianist, if you will. Some people will get lucky, and some people are naturally very, very talented, but craft it. Make sure, you know, and slaughter your babies and all of that. You know, you have to be ruthless with it too. I think, but for us as a company, our slate is sort of fairly neatly divided, with people coming to either the medium for the first time who are established in other media, or the English-speaking market for the first time. And then we've got a whole load of people who've never written anything before, who have a spark and have, and actually, interestingly, you know, and this contradicts what I was saying a moment ago, but interestingly, the scale of the global market at the moment means that there is a greater willingness to look at writers with less experience than I think at any other time in my career. And you know, we've sold a show to HBO Max that was written by a very young woman who was a playwright who'd written a couple of studio plays, and it all spilled out of her. and that was just brilliant, just brilliant.
That's amazing.
I know I've contradicted myself there, but basically, be certain, be strong, work hard.
And have a unique story to tell. It sounds like the woman you're talking about, she had a different voice, a unique voice, so it popped. It wasn't one of a million, I presume.
No, that you're absolutely right, Hayley. And also, she knew what story she wanted to tell, you know, and at every stage of its journey, that particular series, it's just got more muscular, you know, and it's very, very interesting as she's learned how to write for the screen. And it's improved every single part. And I know that the network, you know, we're talking about the HBO development process here. With every step, they have. I mean, I wouldn't say they've been surprised. They have not been surprised, but she has exceeded expectations every single time.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't come through dashing it off and not thinking it through.
Quite right.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I was just going to say that is probably all of us have had, if anything, one hazard of the whole trade is that you do get a lot of half-baked, inchoate,
Yes.
it's just barely seeded ideas, and with people either not knowing how, I mean, I would agree completely, just that knowing the craft and honing that and learn is really important, because we all get sent stuff that's just half-baked, and as you think, okay, there may be something there, but not yet. You really need to think.
The time to mentor you to get your work up to snuff. You've got to do it yourself. I totally agree, Lola. Somebody recently brought me a show concept and wanted me to help them because they love the kernel of the idea. They love the space that the show is in. It's very important to them. They're very passionate about it. They're so passionate about it, they can barely see the forest for the trees. And I sort of gave this person, you know, as a client, I gave this person homework. And I said, you need to go watch a whole bunch of TV shows that are in this vein, not the subject matter, but an unscripted, factual show that follows a particular line of business, let's say, right? And I want you to watch these shows and pause and write down, what is the structure of an episode? What do you see every time? What happens? Are there protagonists and antagonists? Where's the beginning, middle, and end? Is there I want you to start understanding how to craft an episode, what a story is from any one of these shows. I gave her a few examples. I said, and then go back and look at your project and do that. Like you have to understand what the craft is and how to build a story. And today, more than ever, there is such a wealth of knowledge out there. There are books, there are podcasts, there are LinkedIn seminars, there are so many experts who teach a lot of the craft that you don't have to struggle on your own in your room and just go, is this good enough? You've got to put in the work, and before you go to a producer or to an agent, do that work.
Yeah.
Get as far as you can go, getting taught the basics of putting together a story, scripted or unscripted, game show or drama series, feature film or, ARC show. I mean, there's all sorts of knowledge out there that you can gain and start to understand what the bones are, and then put your story and your vision into that format for it, using it in a different way, before you bring it to people and have them assess it. Because agents, people like Tony and Lola and myself sadly, don't have the bandwidth to just mentor a bunch of people who want to break into the business.
Yeah.
Unless they come with a certain level of something, and then you get them the rest of the way.
And I think that's true, and a very good point for people to hear. I do want to, I did promise to offer some Q&A time for folks, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to slip some questions in there. So this one's from Sarah. She says she's a music student And I'm sorry, a music business student. And however, I recently have been getting into the film industry. I'm producing my first short film next week. Do you guys have any tips or advice?
You
Bit
want to
of a general one, but important.
Oh, Tony.
Just believe in it, really. I think that in almost everything I've ever produced, and you know, I've been doing it a while, you are constantly besieged with things coming at you that are unexpected. So firstly, remember what you want to see in the finished product, and just keep that in mind all the way through. Hold firm to that, and don't be put off by the issues that you may be faced with, and equally, and this is a largely unpopular view of producing, but it seems to have served me well. Never engage with the problems that you're being told about from other people. Never engage with reasons why it can't be the way you wish it to be. Just politely brush them off and then just carry on. That would be my view.
I love that, Tony. Thank you. And I'm gonna. I really think that was very good advice. I'm just gonna keep on running through these. We have two more. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to cut it off because we only have 5 minutes left. But John asks, do you have any advice for graduates who are trying to get into a multimedia career?
Get it. I would say just, I'm not sure multimedia. Well, okay. I would just say get experience, get your foot in the door. Just don't be too high and mighty about what the job might be or where it is. Get in there. People come up through all sorts of ways, or you could start out in just anywhere. Even, and a lot of people don't downplay the assistant role. A lot of people are mentored. If you've got a good boss, she or he will mentor you. And, you know, so just get in there, get a job if you can, or if you're going to make something, make it, and then just start how you mean to go on, basically.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of kind of working any contact you have. If you meet anybody, then you know, follow that up. That's probably the wrong thing to say for the three of us on here. I wish I said that.
As long as you don't put your email address in, you can say that, Tony, right?
Yeah, it's okay. Well, we can deliver Richard.
Well, actually, sorry, having said that, I think probably I can speak for the other two and say we're all believers in helping young people and mentoring. We're all believers in giving people a hand. So I think, you know, whoever comes across our paths, I'm sure we're all happy to help.
But Lola's right. If you're an intern at a company, even if you're a graduate student and you're in your late 20s, but you're an intern, as soon as you're in the hallways, you're meeting people, and there's just in the ether, there's more of a chance that one of the senior executives is much more available to you and willing to sit down with you and help you hear what you have to say, what you've done, and get you in the door. So don't be too precious about what level or what company. Get in there. I fully agree. That's how you do it.
I love that. Just basically muck in. Muck in. Okay, last question. This is from Sean. And, you know, I've been told over and over again that different projects of mine need a lookbook. So I think this one's important. And he asks, would seeing a test video or short film of the idea you are pitching increase the chances of convincing producers or investors to support it?
If it's good. That's really the snarky but honest answer.
Yeah.
It will raise your edge. If it's good, yes. But if it's not, you've put a picture in their heads already that if it's not good enough, that's what they're equating your story with, and then you've hurt yourself. So make sure it's good.
Guys, thank you so much. Thank you. I think we're making the organizers sweat that we're almost going to run over. So I am going to stop now. Hayley, Tony, and Lola, really appreciate your time and your wisdom and your effort to be here. So thank you. And this is again on Facebook Live and will be available to people. So hope you enjoy XpoNorth, the rest of XpoNorth in your day.
Nice
Yeah.
to meet you all.
Very much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.